Have you ever wondered why there are nights you lie like haunted by a woman who never truly deserved you, while she can't stop thinking about some guy who treats her like nothing? The brutal answer is this society taught you the wrong way to be a man. They told you to be nice, to be attentive to text on time, to be safe. And what did that get you? You became the backup plan. The invisible good guy who's always there but never chosen. Here's the harsh truth. Women don't obsess over safety. They obsess over the rush of danger, over that sweet ache of uncertainty. You thought being stable would make you stand out. In reality, it killed her desire. She doesn't dream of you at midnight because you're too predictable, too available, too easy to figure out. So the real question is, how do you awaken the primal hunger inside her without begging, without acting, without turning yourself into someone you're not? How do you walk like a man whose presence alone can make her tremble even in silence? Stay here, because what you're about to hear will shake you awake. The very first thing you need to understand is this desire is not born out of logic. It's born out of emotional chaos. A woman can say she wants a nice, stable guy with a good job, but that's the language of her conscious mind. Deep down, buried in the wiring carved into her brain by millions of years of evolution, she craves something entirely different: stimulation, uncertainty, tension. Psychology calls this the dopamine loop. The brain doesn't become addicted to rewards it can predict. It becomes addicted when it doesn't know when the next hit will come, just like a slot machine. A man who's always there, always available, never creates that loop. But a man who gives and withholds, who is both close and distant, who makes her feel near, yet slightly out of reach, he traps her in that loop. He becomes the reason she can't stop spinning the wheel. Remember, these women don't crave men who are safe. They crave men who make them feel alive. When a man can calmly hold eye contact, remain silent just 3 seconds longer than normal, and then allow a small smile to cross his face, suddenly her mind races. What is he thinking? What does he want? Why do I feel my body heat rising like this? That's the moment you plant the seed of obsession. A famous study from Stanford University revealed that uncertainty in emotional response has more than double the effect on attraction compared to consistent attention. Let me say that again, more than double. When you're not always available, when she has to invest emotionally to win your attention, that investment builds value. And it's that very investment that transforms you from just another guy into the man she can't stop thinking about. But don't misunderstand me. This is not about playing toxic games. It's not about lying, ghosting, or acting like you don't care. The difference lies in the energy you radiate. A man who is whole within himself, grounded with his own world and mission, becomes magnetic without even trying. He doesn't need to put on a show. His calmness, his patience, his lack of desperation, that alone speaks louder than 1,000 words. Here's where most good guys destroy themselves. They're terrified of silence. They can't stand the gap between texts, the pauses in conversation. So they overcompensate, filling the space with constant reassurance, constant attention. But what they don't realize is this silence is sometimes the strongest weapon you have. It creates tension. It forces her imagination to run wild. And imagination, once unleashed, is far more powerful than anything you could say. A friend of mine, a former Marine, once told me, on the battlefield, silence is scarier than gunfire. Because when you don't know where the enemy is, your mind creates 100 possible scenarios. The same is true in love. When you're not predictable, when you're not constantly in her face, her mind creates the story, and in that story, you become larger than life. So here's lesson 1. Don't make her feel so safe that you become boring. Safety can turn you into a great friend, but uncertainty makes you unforgettable. Obsession is born not from knowing everything about you, but from realizing she doesn't know enough, and she desperately wants to. And when you truly grasp this, you'll finally understand something crucial. You were never lacking in attraction. You were simply never taught how to awaken it. If in the last part I spoke about uncertainty as a drug that keeps women hooked, now we need to dig deeper into a harder truth. She isn't obsessed with you. She's obsessed with the emotions you trigger inside her. Men often make a fatal mistake by believing, if I were better looking, richer, or more successful, she would want me. Wrong. Desire doesn't operate on the logic of paychecks or gym routines. It operates through emotional attachment models. Research on attachment psychology shows that most women are powerfully drawn to men who create a strange combination: intimacy and a distance, close enough to feel connection, but far enough away that she has to reach for you. Imagine walking in a desert, your throat burning, and ahead you see water. If the water is right there, you drink, and the thirst ends. But if it's a little farther, if you have to push yourself, fight for it, that journey makes the water infinitely more valuable. And here's where most men bury themselves. They give everything too fast, too easily. She doesn't have to invest, doesn't have to wonder, doesn't have to wait. You become fast food, not aged wine. Women don't obsess over what is handed to them. They obsess over the chase, over the journey. In her subconscious, the act of earning you fuels her emotions. The existential philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once wrote, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." That might sound abstract, but think of it in this context. When a woman doesn't know if you'll fully choose her when she feels wanted, yet fears losing you, that very dizziness becomes addictive. It isn't torture. It's adrenaline for her soul. But let me make something clear. A strong man doesn't play cheap games. You don't create uncertainty by lying, disappearing, or acting toxic. You create it by living your truth, by not making her the center of your world. You have your own life, your own mission, your own structure. And when she feels that you are whole without her, but you still choose to give her part of your energy, your value skyrockets. Behavioral psychology calls this the scarcity effect. When something is perceived as rare, people are willing to pay far more than its market value. This is true in economics and even more true in attraction. When your attention, your energy, your presence are not handed out freely, she feels the scarcity. And a scarcity breeds obsession. A friend once joked, "A man can always order pizza. But if a restaurant says, we only serve between 6 and 8 p.m., limited seating, guess what he eats that night? Exactly. Nobody craves what they can always have." Now imagine you're texting with her. Instead of flooding her inbox, you end the conversation at its peak, leaving a cliffhanger. You step away, move on with your life. And in that gap, her mind keeps spinning. The gap becomes the stage for her imagination. And imagination always paints you in bolder, brighter colors. This is the art leading not by control, but by knowing when to stop. Like a master musician, you don't play every note. You leave space, and it's the silence between the notes that makes the melody unforgettable. So if you want a woman to think of you, crave you, even obsess over you, don't try to be better. Create the spaces, the pauses, the unknowns. Because once her imagination takes over, it becomes far more dangerous than any reality you could offer. Once you've understood uncertainty and scarcity, it's time to uncover something even deeper. The one force most modern men never dare face: a woman's fear of abandonment and her hidden craving for control. These two forces drive female psychology beneath the surface, and if you don't understand them, you'll always be reacting in a game you thought you were playing. Here's the raw truth. Women don't obsess over a man because of looks, money, or sweet words. They obsess over the feeling of not being able to fully control him. In a world where everything is predictable and instantly accessible, a man who remains untamed becomes rare. When you don't bow to her moods, when you don't flinch at her silence or tantrums, you send an unconscious signal: you do not own me. And because of that, you can't stop thinking about me. Psychology has a name for this reactance. When someone feels their freedom to control is threatened, they fight harder to regain it. So when a woman can't easily capture you, she feels compelled to chase you. And here's the paradox: it's precisely her inability to control you that breeds obsession. A study at Columbia University once showed that when people believe they might lose an option, the emotional value of that option skyrockets. That's why an ordinary man suddenly becomes extraordinary the moment he doesn't react the way she expected. He becomes an unknown variable, and the unknown always triggers curiosity. But let's be clear, being uncontrollable is not the same as being chaotic or careless. A careless man has no discipline. A strong man, however, is so disciplined that no one else can disrupt the order within him. When you hold your boundaries with calmness, not anger, not begging, you become a fortress. And women are drawn to fortresses. They want to touch the walls, but they fear losing the chance to enter. I once watched a man lose his wife, and instead of standing tall, he collapsed. He begged, pleaded, lost his dignity. And what happened? She pulled away even further, even with contempt. Not because she was cruel, but because deep in her subconscious, she could not desire a man who couldn't stand alone. Evolution wired women to be drawn to men who can survive, adapt, protect, not men who crumble under emotional pressure. Remember Nietzsche's words: "He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow." When you live with a purpose greater than being loved, you free yourself from dependence. And in that freedom, you become the man she cannot get out of her mind. Let me throw in a bit of humor here. Nice guys are like vending machines. You put in a coin, you get what you want. Strong men, on the other hand, are like hidden speakeasy bars. Not everyone gets in, and if you do, the experience becomes unforgettable. So which one do you want to be, the vending machine or the bar nobody can stop talking about? This is the third layer of obsession. A man doesn't captivate by appeasing. He captivates by being a world she can never fully control. Once you understand this, you stop asking, "How do I keep her?" and instead ask, "Is she strong enough to walk beside my world?" And that's the moment you flip the game on its head. We've already peeled back the earlier layers: uncertainty, scarcity, and the fact that she cannot control you. But there is still one final piece, and without it, everything else collapses into cheap tricks. That missing piece is masculine presence. Now, don't confuse presence with simply being physically there. Presence is energy. It's the way you occupy space without having to shout for attention. You've probably seen it before. A seasoned man walks into a room and the atmosphere changes. He doesn't need to be loud. He doesn't need to prove anything yet. Every eye drifts toward him. That is not a social skill. That is an inner state of being. Psychologists call this embodiment. When your mind, your body, and your energy align, people feel it instantly. And women with instincts sharpened over millions of years of evolution pick up on it faster than any words you could ever say. Think about this. Why do so many women obsess over men who don't even talk much? Men who might even come off as blunt. It's because they carry a weight of calmness. They are like mountains, steady, unmoved by storms. In a world of chaos, such a man becomes an anchor. Women crave that anchor, not out of weakness, but because it makes them feel both safe and alive. Meanwhile, good guys lose presence the moment they open their mouths. They rush to prove themselves, fill every silence with nervous chatter, flood her phone with endless messages. And with every attempt to reassure, they send the same signal: I'm not strong enough to let you sit in silence with me. The harsh truth: sometimes silence is more seductive than 1,000 words. There's even a concept in evolutionary biology called the signal-to-noise ratio of SIGO. The higher the signal, the lower the noise, the clearer the message. A strong man communicates through fewer signals, but each one lands with force. He doesn't need 100 texts to prove his interest. One look, one subtle touch at the right time can echo in her mind for days. I remember a funny story a friend once shared. He took a girl to the movies. For 2 hours he barely spoke, just smiled occasionally. Later, she admitted the thing she remembered most about that night wasn't the film, wasn't the snacks, it was the silence. He laughed and said, I thought I was late TCC. Turns out, I was mysterious. That is presence, not performance, not pretending. Just the steady weight of a man who knows who he is. And when you have presence, everything else, scarcity, uncertainty, her inability to control, falls perfectly into place. Here's the key: presence can't be faked. It comes from truly knowing who you are, what you want, and what you're willing to lose. A man who is not afraid to lose is the man who never really gets abandoned in a woman's mind. Paradoxically, the moment you stop fearing loss is the moment she fears losing you the most. This is the final layer: entering a relationship not as a beggar, but as a king. Not to conquer, but simply to bring your presence into that choice. A man like this never needs to chase obsession, because his very existence is the obsession. And now, maybe you've realized the truth. You were never truly lacking for women to desire you. What you lacked was the awakening to live as a man in his full strength. Look back at what we've uncovered. Uncertainty sparks dopamine. Scarcity builds value. Her inability to control you creates obsession, and masculine presence turns you into a world she can't escape. These aren't pickup tricks. They're not dating hacks. They are the foundation of transformation. Because the man a woman never forgets is not the one who flatters her with endless words. It's the one who has looked into his own darkness and still stands tall. The man who doesn't need a woman to fill his emptiness, but chooses to share his overflowing strength with her. Yes, this truth hurts. It hurts to realize that maybe for years you've lived as the good guy, predictable, controllable, forgettable. But pain is also medicine. Once you've seen the truth, you can never unsee it. And that sting of awareness, that is the first step toward freedom. Nietzsche once wrote, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." And if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Tonight, you've stared into that abyss. And if you have the courage to hold that gaze, the abyss will forge you into steel. So this is not a video you just save as a tip or a trick. This is a call to arms. If you've awakened, don't keep it to yourself. Share this with another man, someone who's struggling, someone who's drifting, someone who needs to hear what you just heard. Not as a fan, but as a brother in the arms. Because when men awaken together, it's not just love that changes. Life changes. And maybe that is the obsession worth leaving behind in this world.